Off. Great. And then, so now you can hear me. Hello world that hears me. I'm going to do a little screen share, which is, let's see, let me screen share. The fun thing about Google Hangouts, I don't know how often you do them, but if you screen share your entire desktop and keep your window open, you can have this crazy like infinity screen that happens. That's fun. But what I really want to do is move over here. No, I don't. Oh, crap. That's okay. I think I can fix that. Sorry. This should be super easy to do. Apparently it's not. At least I'm streaming the whole thing live and we're recording it so that we can all come back and laugh at my poor presentation skills later. Let's see, I want to hide that. I do, I want to hide it, but whatever. Maybe it'll go away in a minute. Come on, hide? No, doesn't matter. Okay, so good evening, welcome to the Meetup. What we're going to talk about tonight is Chef Delivery. So Chef Delivery is a brand new thing that Chef announced back in April at ChefConf. The status of delivery is this. It is currently available for early access customers, like invite only. If you want it, you can go to chef.io/delivery and you can sign up for like updates and like sign up to be in the early access program. What you're maybe thinking to yourself right now is, dude, I don't know if I want it. That's why I came to this meetup, so you can tell me about Chef Delivery. So we're going to do that over the next hour or so. Also a little bit about me. I love Chef and talking about Chef, and so someone other than me should watch the time and tell me like, hey, dude, it's time to stop talking, and we'll move on. So we're going to talk about Chef Delivery. Oh, and animated slides. That was fun to watch. Did you see it? But it turns into a truck. Awesome. That's actually maybe the best part of the whole demo, the whole thing. So what I have tonight are some slides that we're going to talk about. I'll introduce you to the concepts of delivery, and then I'm also going to I'll spend most of the time like actually making with the delivery, like doing a demo, kicking around some stuff, showing you code, things like that. Is that cool for everybody? What I highly encourage you to do is interrupt me with questions as you have them, because as it turns out, I know just about everything I'm going to say, so it's kind of boring for me to say the things that I showed up to say. It's more fun for me when you ask me questions, because then I can talk about other things, which is cool. Also, I have stickers and stuff over here if stickers are your thing. So let's talk a little bit about what delivery is and where it's born from. So for a long, long time, Chef has been around sort of automating all of your infrastructure as code and helping our customers automate their infrastructure as code. We've also been on lots and lots of customer engagements and just working with our open source community and see people that are implementing these delivery pipelines. And so what we've done is we've taken our years of experience both in big enterprise, big web companies, small startups, and looked at the common traits of the pipelines sort of across that universe of people that use Chef. And we've come up with a really solid pipeline that I think is the right way to get change from your development laptop into your production environment. And so that's what we've built. Our pipeline looks like this. This is, I think, not controversial. So we're just going to kind of walk through exactly what delivery offers to you. So with delivery, we create this stable pipeline. The stable pipeline always has these steps. The first thing that happens is you create a new change. You're going to create that change on your local system. You're then going to test that change locally. So maybe you're brand new to Chef, or maybe your Chef development practices aren't quite up to speed. Maybe you're not really testing yet, so you totally should be testing. There are lots of test frameworks that you can use within Chef, things like Chef Spec and Server Spec and Food Critic, all of these things, which we'll look at some of at least. So you test your change locally. Once you're happy with your change locally, you're then going to submit that change to delivery. Once that change has been submitted to delivery, that change will be reviewed. And within Chef, we have this rule. We call it the 4I rule. And the 4I rule states this. No code should make it into your production environment without at least 4 eyes looking at it. And I'm sorry to say, but people with glasses, those are not that, like 4 eyes, that doesn't really count. Although I will say that my code is always production ready, so we can just ship that right away. We don't really, like these 4 eyes are good enough. But for everyone else, someone else has to review your change. Once that change has been reviewed, it will then be approved, and then that change will be delivered to your production environment. So it's a pretty simple kind of 6 steps. Every change that you make to your infrastructure, every change that you make to your applications should follow through and flow through this same pipeline. That's the idea behind Chef Delivery. Do you have questions so far? Right, like pretty simple, right? Can we all agree that this feels like a good pipeline? Sound like a reasonable thing? Yeah.
So the biggest problem I see is social dynamics. Review change. I'm too busy to review your change. My change is more important. So
yeah, well, you can't get your change out until you review mine, and I can't get my change out until I review yours. So, but you do raise a good point. Like delivery and this idea of a stable pipeline it's actually, as it turns out, it's not really a technology problem. Or it is a technology problem, but it's as much a cultural problem or a workflow process problem as it is anything else, right? And so the great thing about delivery is not only have we found like a solution, but this solution, this pipeline that we've built, helps reinforce those good practices that you and your teammates should follow to get changes through the system. And that's kind of the idea. As it turns out, all right, this is kind of groundbreaking stuff I'm about to say. Your culture and your tools, like they're so tightly intertwined that you really can't separate the two. The two are both going to reinforce each other and like drive your behavior is driven by your tooling helps drive your behavior. Like it's all intertwined together. So let's look through this pipeline a little bit further. Throughout these 6 steps, some of these things are going to be manual and some of these things are going to be automated. So creating a new change, I'm sorry, but we can't automate that for you. Like if you want to change something, you have, I know it's like stupid, isn't it? It's crazy. We can't automate like the thing that you wanted. So you have to do that yourself. Testing that change locally, again, like we have frameworks that will help you test it locally, but you're going to need to execute those frameworks. You will then decide when that change is ready and submit that change. But once that change gets submitted, some automatic verification tests will run. Now, hopefully, you've run these same verification tests locally, but they should also be run once you submit that change to be sure. Because as it turns out, developers sometimes are lazy and they don't actually run all of the verification tests before they submit a change to be sent out into the world. I know, it's a crazy thought. Like, who wouldn't test their changes first? But we're going to run those verification tests there. The review of the change happens manually. You have to have someone else look at it. And then once you approve the change, again, saying approve is a manual step. But then what we do is we take that change and we build artifacts from that code base. So if it's a cookbook, we publish a new version of the cookbook. We will, if it's a code change, we'll build maybe a deb package or an RPM or whatever the artifact is based on your code. And then we'll run some automated acceptance tests against that. And then once all of those complete successfully, we'll then move into the deliver stage. So once all of your changes have been approved and your acceptance tests have completed, there's a button that you will go and push to say deliver this change. So you push that button and then it sends it off into the delivery process or the release process. That change gets out into your production environment. The other thing that's key with delivery is that we have this is our pipeline, but it's actually a shared pipeline that we're going to use across all of our projects, or at least all of the projects that work together. So it looks kind of like this. Let's say you have some infrastructure code, like Chef Cookbooks, and you have some application code. Maybe it's a Rails application or a Java application or something like this. As it turns out, and I said this earlier today, so you people that were in class with me for the last 2 days, it's weird because I'm going to say some of the same words again tonight. So it might feel like you've heard it before, and you have, it's true. So as it turns out, your applications without any infrastructure, not super valuable. But also your infrastructure without any applications running on it, also not really valuable. Like who gives a shit about your infrastructure if there are no applications running on it, right? And the application that runs on your laptop, probably nobody gives a shit about that either, to be fair and honest, right? It has to be in a real production environment running on real infrastructure. So with delivery, what we have are a number of acceptance pipelines. So let's say we're building up an application. That application has infrastructure that's maybe managed by cookbooks, It may have, microservices, because microservices are like where it's at these days, right? So you have a couple of applications that together, or microservices that together make up the application that the customer cares about. So you have these acceptance pipelines where each one of these things can be tested independently. And that's through the process of like, I create the change, I test it locally, I submit it for review, it gets approved, and then someone hits the deliver button. Well, when someone hits the deliver button at the end of any one of these acceptance pipelines, what happens is all of these changes, all of the latest version of each one of these applications or infrastructure code, whatever, moves into an environment that we call the union environment. And you can think about this as like your integration environment, but we don't call it the integration environment, we call it the union environment. Why do we call it the union environment? Back to your point of what has to change also is not just the tooling, but your workflow process. So part of what we do with delivery is we give you probably a new vocabulary. How many of you have a union environment at your work right now? Right? No one. But when we say with delivery we have this common pipeline, we're also giving you new vocabulary so that everyone can talk about it using the exact same terms. So in our union environment, we bring together the current change plus the latest version of all of the other changes, and we put them in union. So we can see how do these things interact with one another. As it turns out, you may change a cookbook that changes the way your infrastructure works, and that might break your application. Well, I'd rather find that out before I get to production, right? So we can find that out in the union environment. In the union environment, we're going to run some additional automated tests, and when all of those tests pass, we will then take this change and push it out to our rehearsal environment. And our rehearsal environment, again, will run a bunch of automated tests. Assuming that all of those pass, that change will then be sent to the delivered environment, which you might call production today. So it gets published out to your end users or whatever the end state for that is. So what we're going to do actually in the next couple of minutes is walk through a change, walk it all the way through a delivery pipeline. But before I click ahead, what questions can I answer for you on this? Yes?
On tests.
Tests.
You say the acceptance tests and the verification tests?
Yes.
Cookbook, RSpec type tests, application tests?
Right.
What kind of tests are you referring to?
The answer is yes. Or I can use more words. It depends. How about that?
So let's say you have a Java app that there's an entire separate suite of Cucumber tests.
Absolutely.
That execute against it. How does that happen?
So you should totally take the test framework, like all of the tests that you've already built for your applications, you should bring those along and still use those within the delivery pipeline. So depending on what type of tests they are, if they're unit tests, right, you probably want them happening back here in the validation tests when you submit a change for review. If there's something like Cucumber, they probably happen along here as you get to the acceptance phase, but then your Cucumber probably also runs once we get into union. And so what we'll see is that we define the exact specifics of what happens in each one of these stages. We define those in cookbooks. So just because it's a Cucumber test, right, you'll use a chef resource to execute those Cucumber tests. Say kick off those Cucumber tests, and then you'll wait for the response to make sure that all your tests are good before you move forward.
Okay. Is that the delivery plan, I guess?
Yeah, that's like how you get everything through, yes. And we'll look a little bit at what a delivery cookbook looks like and how all of that is managed. Great. Yes?
So I'm not clear at all about what the difference between union phase and rehearsal phase.
Aha.
Are you going to be elucidating that?
I will share with you what the difference between the union phase and the rehearsal phase. And if Andrew lets me talk long enough, I'll even illustrate it with a demo that shows everything about it. Which also is the thing that says what you should do is stay longer so I can talk about that, because that's the part that's key, that's clutch. All right.
So does this also effectively replace your Jenkins CI?
Does it replace your Jenkins CI?
It depends.
Yes. The answer is yes, and the answer is no, and the answer is it depends. And the real answer is what I'd like to do is come back to that question after I've had a chance to demo the delivery pipeline. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
All right, great. I'm glad it is, because I was probably not going to answer it now anyhow. If you said, no, I want the answer now, I probably would have said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to keep it forward. All right. So we have this unified pipeline. The idea behind having a pipeline that has a shared shape, it's a unified shape of our pipeline, is that everyone in our organization who's responsible for getting changes from a laptop out to the production environment or to the delivered environment knows the shape of that pipeline. It's not different from one application to the next. The shape of the pipeline is the same. We all have this common vocabulary to talk about that pipeline. We all understand how the process works. And that's very important. What we find, if you have multiple applications, you may have at least one pipeline to get each one of those applications out to your production environment, and the shapes of those pipelines might be vastly different from one application or one set of infrastructure code to the next. And that we find is a recipe for disaster, frankly. So let's just kind of dig through. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to switch to demo mode, and we're going to walk through a change throughout this whole process. So let me switch out of this screen, and I want to show you a thing that we have. So I have a bunch of tabs open here, all these tabs with these orange stars. All the way on the right, I have what is called the delivered environment. So delivered, we call it delivered. We don't call it the production environment. We call it the delivered environment. If that's causing concern for you, you can think about it like the production environment, but you can't say that word. It's from this point forward, it's known as the delivered environment. I also have the rehearsal environment, my union environment, and an acceptance environment. So I have this application deployed in 4 different environments: acceptance, union, rehearsal, and delivered. As it turns out, this application, not surprisingly, looks identical across all 4 of these. It's a very simple web application that right now says, hello, chef friends. What I'd like to do is look at the chef recipe that builds this application. So I'm, let's see, yeah, I'm pretty good there. Actually, I'm just going to exit out of here. I am going to try again to hide that thing. There we go, that's better. So let me see what I have. Yeah, let me move over here to this guy. I'm going to use my Atom text editor to open up this application. It has a recipe called default. So this particular application is deployed with Chef. I know, shocking, surprise, right? So let's just quickly walk through what happens here. This application, this recipe, will include a recipe called HTTP DBAAS. And so let me just be really clear. I'm going to stop saying DBAAS. What that means, like this nomenclature that we use internally for that, is delivery build as a service. So from now on, I'm just going to call this the HTTP cookbook, and this is the site cookbook. It's not the site DBAS cookbook. It's just the site cookbook when I say the words. So it's going to include a recipe from another cookbook. That recipe is the install Apache recipe. So as you might imagine, its job is to install the Apache web server. And then in this particular cookbook that configures our site, we set up an httpd.conf. We go out to a remote location and grab a tarball. That tarball is like the application that we're going to deploy. And we're just going to explode that tarball here. We also have a home page, the index.html.erb. We just saw that home page. It was that thing that said, hello, chef friends. So that's driven by a template within Chef. And you can see that there's an execute command here where it's just exploding that tarball. So it's a very simple application. When this recipe runs, it's going to go out to wherever that remote location is, grab that tarball, bring it locally, and expand it, and then also render this index.html.erb. So this index file, if we take a look at it, it's of course is over here under my templates default index.html.erb. And who knew, it's just an HTML file. But one of the things you'll see here is the node.chef environment. So remember in my tabs, it said acceptance and delivery or delivered and rehearsal. That's your node chef environment. And then the other thing that we'll find here is I have this attribute here for the node site project name. It's just an attribute in the page. And then I also have this other attribute here for node site company name. And there might be one other node attribute that's in here. So again, a company name. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That company name is coming here from the cookbook attributes file. The site company name is Chef Friends. And then there's also site project name, and that's just some crazy text that says whatever. Can I answer questions for you about this cookbook? Does everyone have kind of in their head a mental model of what's happening here if I were to execute this recipe? Kind of makes sense? Okay. So what I'm going to do is make a change to this attribute file. So now I'm going to SSH back into a workstation that I have set up that has all of the right delivery stuff pre-configured. So I'm going to CD into workspace. You'll see here that I have two cookbooks. I have my HTTP cookbook and my site cookbook. So I'm going to go into the site cookbook. And from here, I'm going to edit my attributes default. And I'm going to change Chef Friends. Why don't I just change Chef to Toronto? Now I can say, hi, Toronto friends, because that's awesome, right? I'm going to write and quit that. The other thing that I probably should have done was shown you like git status. Of course, we have a change now. I'm on a branch called Nathan Reset Demo. I shouldn't be on that branch. What I should be on is a git, sorry, let me move back up here, git checkout master. And let me just git checkout that file because it doesn't like to switch branches when you have things that are changed. Git checkout master. Now I'm going to git checkout a new branch. Oh, let me git pull first, make sure I have the latest and greatest. Now I do. Git pull, git checkout. -b Nathan Toronto. I'm going to go back into that attribute default. Now, if I typed too fast or you got lost there, I made a change, but then I backed out that change, and so now I have to remake that change. Okay, so I have one file that's changed. The other thing I need to do is I need to adjust the version of this cookbook. Every time you have a change, you should bump the version of your cookbook. So what file is that stored in? The metadata.rb, right. So this is currently at version 0.3.0. I'm just going to bump that up to 0.3.1. Now I have a change. And what I should do next is what? So if we go back to the slides, I just created a change, right? Create a new change. So now I need to test my change locally. That's the next step that I'm going to do. For the sake of time, I'm not going to run all of the various tests locally, but I will do like food critic on this cookbook and make sure that it passes. I'll run RuboCop on this cookbook and make sure that it passes. And sure enough, it passes, no offenses found. I could run chef spec. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip the chef spec stuff and say, all right, this looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Also, it was a pretty minor change. If what I just did by changing an attribute is break this cookbook, like we're in for a real world of hurt. So, but what I'm ready to do now that I've created the change and tested it locally, that all happens on my local workstation, I'm now ready to submit that change. So I'm going to use the delivery CLI. I'm going to call this command delivery review -- no open. And of course, it throws an error for me. The reason it throws an error for me is because I haven't actually committed anything to this branch. So I should probably do that first. So I'm going to do a git status, just so we see what's going on. And then I'm going to say git commit -am. We are in Toronto. Now that I've done that, I'm going to run that delivery command again. And that delivery command is this: delivery review no open. So by default, when you run delivery review, what it's going to do is take this change and submit it to your delivery server. But then it's also kind of making an assumption that what you want to do next is open up that change in the delivery UI, which is exactly what I want to do. But because this is a remote workstation, I'm not actually going to open it up from the remote workstation. I'm going to open it up from my own laptop. Does that make sense to everyone? I SSH into this workstation. So all I'm running there is SSH. I don't have like Xterm, and I can't like see a browser on that remote node. Does that make sense?
For this review, you'd have to push the change, right?
I just did a git.
You commit, you didn't push.
What did I do? No. Review change for Nathan. No, it's all good. So I did not push the change. You're right.
But do you need to?
I do not need to. All I need to do is submit that change for review. So let's come over here, and this will be awesome because we're going to look at the delivery UI for the first time. So there's a couple of key things about delivery. One, we've already talked about. It gives you this shared pipeline. But the other sort of idea behind delivery is it gives you visibility into the changes as they move across your organization. So I have, in delivery, I have organizations. I have one organization called the DBAS. And then within that, I have two projects, the HTTP project and the site project. So I'm going to go into the site project, which is where I submitted a change. And you'll see here that it says we are in Toronto. So this is a change that I recently submitted. Also, if I were to look at the dashboard, I could come back and see that there is one change that's currently in process, and it's ready to be approved, or it's getting ready to be approved. So I can click on that, and that will take me right back to this page. We're in Toronto. And if I drill in here, of course, I could scroll down and see some other like older changes back here. But if I click on this guy, it's going to take me in to this stage. So I've now created my change. And this is kind of an eye chart, so I'm just going to read it for you. Tested it locally. I submitted the change. Now the change is ready for review. So it's reviewable on my delivery server. And what happens the minute I submit it for review, we actually run some verification tests against it. So before I ask anyone else to review it, I'm going to run my unit tests, my lint tests, and my syntax checks on that change to make sure that they all work. And I can drill into any of these, and you'll see that what it does is it actually runs some chef code to run, in this case, this is the syntax check. So the syntax check is going to run knife cookbook test. It's going to run food critic. No, it's not going to run food critic. It's going to run knife cookbook test. The lint test is going to run food critic. You see it here, execute food critic, and Rubocop on that change. And then finally, the unit test is going to run chef spec against that change. So as we see here, all of those have passed, and this change is now awaiting approval. So I can start the review of this, and now in the browser, again, what I want to do is make these changes visible. I can actually drill in to the changes and see them in the browser, exactly what changed. I can get the diff between the two. So my attribute file changed from Chef Friends to Toronto Friends. My second file is the metadata.rb. It changed from version 3.0 to version 3.1. I can make comments. If my browser is a little bit larger, maybe. I can make comments on these changes. Let's go back here to status. Oh, what I need to do, of course, is start the review. So let me just show you what I did there. I went to status, and I clicked on start review. So I am now not the person that just made that change. I'm someone else. So I'm going to start reviewing that change. What's that? I am. I'm the third and fourth eyes, right? So now I can come in here. I can look at those changes again. I can comment on the changes themselves. So I can say something like, looks good to me, ship it, like that. And then we support emoji, so or emoticon, so LGTM, and then the little ship it squirrel. I'll add that comment. So that's there. And then can somebody come hit the approve button? Because I wrote the code. I don't want to push the approve button. Someone come push my, like, just push on the pad. Someone can do it. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Don't worry, you can deliver it later when it comes time to deliver. You're like a dentist now. Look at that, you did it backwards and upside down. That's awesome. Beautiful. So you've now just said, hey, I approve this change, and yes, I agree, I confirm. So that's been successful. So now what happens if we look back at our slide, actually we don't need to look at our slide because the UI is going to do a really good job of displaying it all for us. So now that I've reviewed the change and approved the change, let's just look. Actually, I'm going to do this really quick here. So just so we're all clear, I submitted the change and then the verification test ran. The tests that ran were lint, syntax, and unit. Then we reviewed the change and approved the change. Now that the change has been approved, it's going to go through a build stage. The build stage is going to do this list of things. The first thing it's going to do is merge that change back into my master branch. After it merges it, it's going to run lint, syntax, unit, quality, security, and then publish that change. So let's just see what's happening over here in the browser. Let's see. Here, I'm going to close out that guy because we're never going to look at him. So build is happening. The unit tests have passed. The lint tests have passed. And the syntax tests are currently running. And again, if I flip back to my dashboard, we'll see that I have one change currently in the build phase for the site cookbook. Let's click back here. So now the build phase has completed. Well, it's still running. So quality, security, and publish. These are all now running. What I can do, though, if I switch back to my workstation, if I git checkout master, I can run a git pull, and we'll see that it pulls in those changes from that branch that I just submitted for review. So now master is up to date with those changes that are currently running through my pipeline. The acceptance tests are now beginning. So again, if we switch back to this thing, view, present, yeah. So it's done the build works successfully. So the next phase is, or the next stage is the acceptance stage. And what it's going to do in the acceptance stage is it's actually going to take this change and put it onto a real server. So it's going to provision a node or a set of nodes to have this change run on it. It's going to deploy this new change to that set of nodes. It's going to run a smoke test, a functional test, and potentially a compliance test. So again, it's just going to run more tests on this. But now that I've provisioned it, I don't really care about like linting it anymore or unit tests. I do tests that are sort of higher level testing on this deployed environment. And so what we can see back over here as this is running, so the acceptance test is still running, but what has completed is the deploy process. So in the provision process, it said, go and spawn a new node. In our case, the acceptance environment is always there, so we just push new changes onto it. That environment already exists. But when it did this deploy, if I looked at my acceptance page here, it still says Chef Friends, but if I refresh the page, it says Toronto Friends. So this change has been deployed now to my acceptance environment. It's still running through the changes. Well, it's completed all of the acceptance tests. So now it's ready to be delivered. And let's just, before we click the deliver button, let's just make sure we understand what's going to happen next. So when I click the deliver button, the first thing that's going to happen is my union environment is going to be created. I'm going to provision that environment, deploy the change to it, run the smoke, functional, and compliance tests in that environment. If all of those pass, then I will then do the same for my rehearsal environment. And if all of those pass, then this change will be fully delivered. So now that environment is fully, or that change has been made all the way out to my delivered environment. So, will you come up and deliver this change for me? Awesome. Yes, question. What's that? What happens if it fails? So it could have failed at any step along the way. And maybe in the next run through our delivery pipeline, I'll create a change that will fail like lint testing or something like that. So we can see it fail early. And then I'll also show you how things can make it all the way through the acceptance pipeline, but then fail in the delivery pipeline. So we'll look at both of those things live. How about that? Instead of me talking about it, let's do it for real. All right, this is ready to be delivered. Would you do us the honor, please, and come click the deliver button? It's going to ask you to confirm. Can you confirm that we are, in fact, in Toronto?
We are in Toronto.
Yes. All right, very good, very good. Sweet. So now it says my change has been delivered. And you can see here that the very next thing it's going to do is move into my union environment. And if I look at the dashboard again, it's scrolling off to the side here. Let's see if I can get this UI over on this. Yeah, so I probably can't see much beyond this. Well, I guess I could do like make it smaller so it's harder to see. But it'll fit on the screen now. So Union is currently building. If you can't tell, this is blue. So this change that went out earlier, it's delivered is green because it passed. Once Union completes, this will turn green, and then this blue box will move over here to rehearsal, and then it will move on to delivered. All of this is going to happen automatically. As soon as you get through the acceptance test and somebody says deliver this change, there is no stopping this unless tests fail along the way. That change is being sent out, and it will be delivered. Yes?
You said it provisions an environment?
Yes.
So it stands up nodes from nothing?
It can stand up nodes from nothing. It uses chef provisioning as part of the recipe. So with the way chef provisioning works, if you've not used provisioning before, it works like any other resource in chef, so it's test and repair. So our provisioning recipe says build an environment that's the acceptance environment. That environment already exists, so now deploy that change to it. Build an environment that's the union environment. Ooh, look, union's done. So the union, like we keep the various stages, we keep these environments running and then just continually deploy new changes to them. It could be though that as soon as I'm done with this acceptance, I could have a recipe that throws that environment away. And so every time I'm deploying new infrastructure.
So how would it deal with a database-backed?
Right. So if it is a database-backed thing, what you probably want to do is not destroy that infrastructure with every change. Also, with this, you're going to get to a place where you're deploying changes probably more frequently than every 6 months. So you want to maybe keep those environments around. Yes?
So I may have missed something, but it's not clear to me when you delivered what the environment was, and what change happened to make it union, what change you're going to do to make it.
Yes, so that same change, that same code change is moving through all of the environments. So
yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah, all right,
I'm
so.
not understanding how do you get from one environment to the other, and what's the difference between them?
So the difference between them, I'll start with that, and then I'll talk about how do you get from one to the other. The difference between them is they are physically different environments. So I have a virtual machine, in this case, that is my acceptance machine. I have one that is my union machine, one that's my rehearsal, and one that's delivered. So these are, you can think of them as fully separate virtual machines, because in fact, they are fully separate virtual machines.
But,
yeah?
If I'm running the same test over,
yes.
Different but identical virtual machine.
Yes.
Then I'm running 4 tests.
Yes.
Exactly the same.
Yes. Why?
So,
because.
What am I missing?
Yeah. So the thing that I want to remind you of is this is what's happening. We have right now.
Oh, okay. So
right?
I'm looking at it from one.
Exactly. Like what I'm showing you right now is only this top line. Like what I'm showing you is there's just one thing that goes all the way through here. And so it feels like what I'm doing is just a lot of duplicative effort, right?
But it's integrating it all.
I have multiple acceptance pipelines.
Integrating it, unionizing.
Exactly. It brings them all together in a union here. And then runs them. Okay.
So what's the difference between union and shared then?
Union and rehearsal.
Oh, rehearsal.
Yes. So we go union, and then we go rehearsal, and then we go delivered. Let me demonstrate that with a demo, or let me answer that question with a demo. So first, let's make sure, let's check in on our change. It looks like it's fully delivered. So my acceptance environment, we already know that says Toronto Friends. If I come over here to union and refresh that page, Toronto Friends, come over here to rehearsal. It's very exciting. Look, we're also Toronto Friends. And guess what's gonna happen in delivered? Anyone guess? Yeah, you're right. It's gonna say Toronto Friends. That's awesome. So now, let's take another change that we have and run it through the same delivery pipeline. So in order to do that, I'm actually gonna move to my local workstation. I'm gonna come out of this workstation that I set up in the cloud. And I'm gonna go up the directory, and I'm gonna, sorry, you can't see that because it's down at the bottom of the screen. I'm gonna go into this thing. So I'm gonna pull this, make sure I have the latest changes. I'm in my HTTP cookbook. If I open that up in my text editor, you'll see that it has a recipe called default. The default recipe does nothing, but it's cool because our other recipe, remember our site recipe includes from the HTTP cookbook the install Apache recipe, right? Do you remember it said that? Okay. So what that does is it says package name is Apache 2, and then it does a little crazy if check. I'm gonna make a change here that's gonna, it's like if you know what I'm doing, you know, you can see that like I'm showing my hand, I'm gonna make something break later. So we can answer that question of like what happens when things break. So that's cool. So all this does basically is it installs Apache and it starts and enables that service for you. So these are the things that I'm going to do. So I'm going to make one change here. Just I'm going to take this package name, which is just a variable, and I'm going to do some string interpolation on it. So what's that going to do for me? Rubocop might not care. Food Critic will totally care. Rubocop might catch it also. I'm not really sure. So I just made a change, but before I do anything else, let me check out -b. I'm going to call it this branch Nathan busted. No, I won't call it busted. I'll call it Toronto also because Toronto. I'll call it that. And I should of course go into my metadata .rb and bump that from 3.1 to 3.2. Okay, so now locally, I can see that I have two files that I've changed. I can run my tests locally. So locally, I might run something like Food Critic on this file, and of course, Food Critic complains. I could run something like Rubocop on this thing, and it's good. Like it doesn't care about that string interpolation thing. And then I could also run my chef spec tests on that. So I could use chef exec rspec. Ooh, not with a K though. And format, I'll set it to documentation, and I'll turn on colors. And I'm using a release candidate of a thing, so it's going to throw some warnings at me, I think. But it's going to run my chef spec tests. And so if you haven't seen chef spec tests, let me show you what these are testing really quickly. In my install Apache, it's running that cookbook, and it's saying that it expects the chef run to not raise an error. It expects the chef run to include the apt recipe, to install Apache, start Apache, and enable it on reboot. And so we can come back here and we can see that I have 7 examples and 0 failures. Now that's kind of low, but you can trust me if you can't see it. 7 examples, 0 failures. So that all works, but my Food Critic fails. But let's say I ignore my Food Critic failure because I'm lazy and I didn't actually run Food Critic, so I don't realize that it's going to fail. What I'm going to do is submit that change. So delivery, review, no open. Oh, nope, can't do that yet. I have to commit it first. Let's see, so whatever, change the package name. Not really what I did, but whatever, it's cool. So now I'll do a delivery, review, no open again. So I'm gonna submit that change for review. That pushes it up to my delivery server. So if I come back over here to my delivery server and I look at the dashboard, we see that this HTTP cookbook now has one change. Change the package name. I can drill into that. And I can see that my syntax check is currently running. The syntax check runs knife cookbook test. So that validates that I have good Ruby. No Ruby errors there, so that passes. Next, it's going to run either lint or unit. It really, like the order doesn't really matter. It's running lint first. So I expect lint will fail. And so we're just going to give it a second, and it's going to barf. It's going to say no good on the Food Critic. I hope it barfs. It might not barf. It's a live demo. If it doesn't barf, it's not my fault. I'll explain away why it doesn't barf, but I think it's going to break. It should break. Come on, break. Oh, it passed. Oh, it passed. Oh, of course it passed. We'll assume that it broke. Why don't we do this? Here, we'll make it actually break. We'll do it in a really stupid way, though. I'm just going to have in my recipe, I'm just going to add another end. So I'm going to have a dangling end. Like the thing you should not do is have a dangling end, but I'm going to do it anyhow. So I'm going to get commit-am dangling. And of course, locally that would fail, but I'm just going to do it anyhow, just so that we can see it actually fail. Boy, I hope this one actually fails, because otherwise I'm gonna be pretty embarrassed, but whatever. It's cool, we're all friends, right? We're friends here. So I have another change. Let's see, did I submit that? I did submit it. Let's see, oh, there it is, dangling end. So it's on the same branch, so I can see it here now. And if I come into this, the verify is currently running. So it's running my lint check first this time, because like it's going to run all three of them. It doesn't really matter, and the order doesn't matter. But the lint check failed. Woo! Yay! I have something that failed, and I can of course drill into this and like see the stack trace and find out like what happened. So that's bad. We don't want the dangling end. I'm going to remove that. I hope I'm not going too fast for you. Yeah. Git commit and fix my end. So my end was dangling out, and now I've fixed it. Delivery, review, no open. Let's see, the other thing that I can do here, though, now that this has failed, if I come back to dashboard, I click on this guy. So verify failed. I see that it failed. Both the lint and the syntax failed. So I need to fix that. So I'm going to just push that through, do another delivery review, no open. Go back here. I fixed my end. Now my verification steps are all running again. But while that's running, so we've seen like how it fails in the acceptance pipeline and what we need to do to fix it. While that's running, I just want to talk about a thing that I hate about this cookbook. This cookbook is really stupid because it's called the HTTP cookbook, and it has this recipe called install Apache. Well, I think install Apache is too verbose. It's called an HTTP cookbook. I can imagine that it's going to do something with Apache. So if I change this recipe's name, I'm just going to rename this recipe. I'm going to call it install.rb. Like if I say HTTPD or HTTP and the recipe is install, you know it's going to install Apache. You don't have to call that recipe install Apache. So I'm going to change that. Of course, that's going to break like, well, my default is going to be fine, but my install Apache spec, I should probably rename that also. So I'm going to rename that from install Apache spec to just install spec, but not with 2 underscores, because that would be bad also. I should do it the right way. And then I'm just going to change this describe so that it's just describing it install. And then I have a server spec here, but it doesn't actually do anything, so that's cool. So did that. Oh, it does it here. I should rename this directory to just install, even though we're not necessarily going to run that. Change this thing, rename that to install spec, and rename this guy to install. All right, so I've made a bunch of changes. You probably haven't followed along all of the changes. It's cool. What we're going to do over here is we're going to do a get status. We're going to see that there are 3 files that have been added and 3 files that have been deleted. And you're going to say, dude, you should have done all of that from the command line and done a git rename, because then it would be easier. But whatever, I didn't do that. So whatever, it's cool. I'm just going to git add everything. Get status is going to This is going to know the right thing. So I've just renamed a bunch of files, right? So before I should test these locally, right? So I could run, you know, like Food Critic. Here's the problem. Like running Food Critic and running Chef Spec and running RuboCop, like I'm running I have to remember all of these different tools. Wouldn't it be cool if instead of running all of these different tools, I could just do what the delivery server is going to do anyhow? And I could run just a delivery command to test all of these things. It would be cool, Nathan, wouldn't it? That would be awesome. I wish I could do that. So I can. I just have to remember exactly how to do it. Luckily for me, I have command history, so I can always delivery job. There we go. There it is. All right. So what I'm going to do is run this command. It's going to be actually, I can go back here because I fixed my path from earlier. So I can just run delivery job verify. And remember, when you submit a change for verification, it does this. And what I'm going to verify is my lint, my syntax, and my unit. I'm going to run that locally in a Docker container. And the base Docker image or the base Docker container I'm going to use is this buddy of mine who works with me. His name is Seth Falcon. So he published this delivery node on Docker Hub called dnode v4. But before I do this, actually I'm going to hit return and then I'm going to escape it right away. I have to submit my change because we've learned from like 3 failures of mine that the thing you have to do is actually commit your change for this all to work. So rename the recipe. All right, so now I can run that same command here, delivery job verify lint syntax unit. I'm going to run it locally in a Docker container, and that totally failed. But it's okay because I know why it failed. So let me tell you a little bit about what's happening with Docker. I'm running boot to Docker, but I don't have my shell initialized properly. And if you don't know what that means, because you don't run boot to Docker or you don't use a Mac, it's cool. Shell init. Oh, it does. That's awesome. So what I have to do is export these 3 variables. Done.
If you wrap that in an email.
Yeah, of course. I could totally like do it for real, but I only like, I'm not sure I want to do this. Also, I have to be honest with you. This thing I'm about to run where I'm running like this delivery verify locally with a Docker container, this is like hot off the presses code that Seth gave me last night. He destroyed my night because we were talking about delivery. I said, yeah, I'm doing this demo tomorrow. And he's like, oh, let me show you what I'm working on. And I said, I want that because I want to show that to the world. So it's not like it's in a couple of branches that are, I don't even know where, but it's totally going to work. And by totally going to work, I mean, man, I sure hope it totally works. But what this is doing is it's going to run the exact same delivery commands that the delivery server is going to run, but it's going to run those verification tests locally. So instead of me having to remember that like syntax means knife cookbook chefs, lint means food critic and RuboCop, and unit means chef spec, I can just run, and also that's good for cookbooks, but that's not good for your Java app that you're going to deploy. You're not going to like run food critic against your Java app. That would be stupid. And I'm not saying that you're stupid if you tried that. It's cool if you did. But so it's running through these. So it's executing RuboCop on that thing in the delivery, in that container that I just stood up. Now it's running recipe delivery truck unit. So the delivery truck is what does where we define what all of these stages look like. This is going to pass. It's just going to take a minute or so while it runs that delivery truck unit test. Once it passes, I can then submit this change for review. So that's good. Like I ran that whole verification thing locally. It's all good. I know it's going to work. So I'm going to put that into my acceptance pipeline. So delivery review, no open. There's another change that I'm pushing through. It's all still on the same sort of change. So there's one here for approval. You can see here that the last commit is rename the recipe. So I actually have like 4 commits stacked up on top of each other. I'm now ready to run the verification commands. Of course, the verify stage runs automatically. So it's doing the lint, the syntax, and the unit. And you know what's going to happen, right? It's all going to pass. So we just need to wait for it to pass. What's going to happen after it passes? What will we do? What does that say? We're going to start a review, and then we're going to look at the code changes that were made, and we're going to be very happy with them because I write really, really good code, as I've clearly demonstrated to you. So we're then going to do what to that change? Well, no, we can't deliver it yet. We got to go through another phase before we can deliver it. We're going to approve it. I think somebody said approve. And then when I run through the approve process, it's going, so it's in the submit change. We're going to review it. We're going to approve it, and then it's going to build it. So the build is going to merge that change into master. It's going to run my lint, syntax, unit, quality, security, publish. All of that is going to pass. And then we'll be ready to go and click that deliver button.
When it publishes, does it manage the version?
Yes, it's what it's doing, the publish phase for this, because this is a cookbook, what's happening in the publish phase is it's going to a chef server and it's incrementing the version in the environment that we're deploying this thing to. So I'm about to, when I publish it, I'm actually deploying it to my acceptance environment.
Does it bump the version of the cookbook itself?
No, I bumped it as part of my change, remember?
Okay. It's
yes.
using that.
Yes, it will use that to go and set it in
an
the acceptance
environment or
thing.
a policy?
In an environment. It's an environment today. Okay, so this is almost done. So when I get through this approval pipeline though, the build completes, I can then go and hit deliver. What's going to happen when I deliver this change? The first thing that's going to happen is this change is going to get deployed to Union. And what's going to happen there? Anyone know what's going to happen when I get to Union? Anyone have a guess? You can think about it for a minute. If you come up with the answer, just shout it out. All right. The other one is going to fail. Like this is going to pass our entire acceptance test, right? This recipe by itself works fine. But as it turns out, we don't run this recipe by itself. The site recipe, the site cookbook uses this recipe. The site cookbook includes the install Apache recipe. By virtue of the fact that it includes the install Apache recipe, there is no longer an install Apache recipe, so it's going to break. My full acceptance pipeline is going to pass. Everything along this path, so if you think about it, we're now in this second row, everything along here is fine. There's nothing wrong with this cookbook. I will not discover that this cookbook includes a breaking change until I get to my Union environment. And in my Union environment, it's going to grab the latest copy of this cookbook, and it's going to grab the delivering copy of this cookbook, run them in Union, and it's going to fail. So then, when it fails, here's what I have to do. I have to somehow fix that. That's going to stop the pipeline from moving. No changes can make it out to my delivered environment because Union is busted. So in order to change this, in order to fix this, what I'm going to have to do is come back here and change something about one of the components. How could I fix it if it was busted like this? What are some things I could do to fix it? There are two things I can do. I could update which?
Oh, yeah.
I could update the site cookbook, and instead of including install Apache, it could just include the install recipe. And that would pass through its acceptance pipeline. And then when I put it in Union, would it work? Totally would. What else could I do?
You roll back the other
I could either roll back the other one, or I could make it a backwards compatible change. I could essentially copy the install cookbook and make a copy of it called install Apache and get that through. And when it goes to Union, it will fix. And then what I would do is probably go back here and use just the install recipe. So I could do that kind of as two separate changes to get it through my pipeline. But here's the thing. When Union breaks, we're going to make some change to make Union better, to make it healthy again. But here's the problem. What if the thing that we do to fix Union relies and only works because Union was broken the way that it was broken? Stop and think about that for a minute, right? So I introduced a change, a broken environment. When I introduce another change, that environment is fixed. But maybe that environment is fixed because of the way it was broken before. And the fix makes the assumption that the environment will be broken, and now I'm going to fix that environment. Does that make sense? So this is why we have the rehearsal environment. Remember, rehearsal is now essentially a copy of your delivered environment. So if I fix Union here, but the fix only fixes it because it was broken before, when I now move forward into rehearsal, rehearsal wasn't broken before. So now I take all of the changes that both broke and fixed Union, and I apply those changes in my rehearsal environment. If rehearsal works, then that change will get delivered. But at this point, rehearsal could break because my fix relied on the broken. So now Union is good, but rehearsal is broken. So I have another opportunity to fix Union in a way that will work regardless of what the environment is in. And so now I can get rehearsal fixed, and then it will get delivered.
Do you initialize rehearsal from copy of delivered, or should it be new?
So it depends. This in my current state, I keep my Union rehearsal and delivered just running, and I just continually apply changes to them. So right now, rehearsal has all of the changes that were most recently applied to delivered.
Okay, but if there's state in delivered,
Yeah.
depending on versus if you're
So
assuming it's a net new environment.
right, if there's state in delivered that matters, like you're not going to have that state in Union or rehearsal either.
Well,
Right.
you can copy it back.
You could copy it back for sure. And so part of the provisioning process could be to copy back the state into your rehearsal environment. That could be part of the provision. Absolutely. All right, let's see what's going on over here. I realize we're like an hour in, maybe a little bit longer, but you know, y'all are enjoying the talk, right? So 57 minutes, oh, it's not been an hour yet? Awesome, and we've like broken a bunch of shit, seen a bunch of shit work. So I'm gonna hit the deliver button and confirm that because I want you to see like how things are going to break here. So I have this change, it's currently in Union. Union is going to break. We're gonna, while it's thinking about breaking, I'm just gonna come back to my code. I'm not gonna submit the change yet, but I'm gonna copy recipes install into recipes install apache.rb. So now I just made my cookbook backward compatible. So I introduced a breaking change. I should have made it backward compatible, seen that change go out, and then gone to all of its dependents. Because as it turns out, if you think about it also, like this is a very simple example, but the thing that I just changed was something pretty foundational, the way Apache gets installed. It's likely that that impacts more than just the build cookbook. There might be other applications that I've deployed that are gonna be impacted by that. So the reasonable thing to do is first make this cookbook backward compatible, and then go change all of the things that depend on it, and then come back and make this like the right change that I want it to do. So I'm gonna just do a git commit am make it backwards at right. I have to add it first because it's a new thing. Let's see if delivered has broken. So Union has in fact broken. Of course, there's like Union is busted. Let's see what happens if I refresh Union. Like it's still working there, but we know that, let's see how it busted. So yeah, this is the one that's busted. Union is busted. It broke on the deploy, so it tried to run Chef Client. And if I look at this stack trace, it will tell me that there is no cookbook called install Apache. So again, if I come back here, dashboard, look at my thing, Union's busted. I could rerun Union, but rerunning Union, what's that gonna do? Nothing, it's not gonna change anything. I need to submit my new change. So let me go ahead and do that, delivery, review, -- no open, pushes that new change up. Go back here in my dashboard or into my project. Well, I'm clicking too fast for my browser, my web to keep up. Pipeline, hello, spinny, spinny, spinny. All right, we're gonna let that run. We're gonna come back over here and I wanna talk to you. I'm gonna show you how it all gets fixed. Like we'll watch it fix all the way through. But I have a couple other slides I wanna share with you. So each one of these stages along the process actually just are part of our build cookbook. So we have a build cookbook, and in that build cookbook, you have a bunch of recipes. You have a recipe for lint, a recipe for syntax, for unit. All of those phases that you go through during the stages are just managed as recipes. So you can control them all with Chef. So for example, it doesn't have to be a cookbook, right? You have this phased execution. I'm gonna run my unit tests, so I write a log out to that, I pull in my repo, and then it's a Maven thing. So run my JUnit tests, run Maven tests against the current repo and see what happens. And if that unit test passes, then we're good to go and move on. So the things that you're testing here can be as complex as you want, as long as you can model them in a recipe. And the thing is, a recipe is just Ruby. So I don't care how complex it is, you can model it in your recipe. If we think about cookbooks specifically, and that's what we've looked at tonight, when you think about taking a cookbook and putting it into its delivered environment, or delivering a cookbook, there are a couple of places where delivered might be. You might decide that what you want to do is publish your cookbook to the supermarket. Now that supermarket might be the public supermarket at supermarket.chef.io, or it might be an internal supermarket that you've stood up where you and your teammates collaborate on cookbooks. So the end of a delivery pipeline for a cookbook could be that it gets published to a supermarket. It could be that it gets published to a chef server. In our case, what we're seeing is it gets updated on the nodes. But honestly, like the real thing that happens when it gets updated on the nodes is we're publishing it to a chef server. We're changing the environment constraints for the environments where these nodes are running, and then we're kicking off a chef client run on the nodes in that environment. And so that's what's happening here, and it's pulling down those changes, changing your infrastructure. Your applications, like you're not going to deploy application changes to a chef server, although you may deploy application changes, say, to an Artifactory or a Nexus repository, and then you'll deploy them directly to the nodes where you're sending them. So it's very easy to create these delivery pipelines. You'll have a project Git repo, you'll have a build cookbook, and a project config file. The project config file looks something like this. You have a version number, you specify where your build cookbook is, and the build nodes, like which nodes are you building this on? And the build nodes is just a search criteria that you would use with Chef Server. So here, like our build nodes for our unit, the name has a star-unit test is somewhere in the name. It says it's a unit test node. The high-level architecture looks like this. With delivery, we're making it easy for you to have that shared common pipeline. The shape is always the same. We're also making it very easy for you to visualize the change through your infrastructure. So delivery itself, you can interact with through a web browser, or as you've seen, I've interacted with it through the CLI as well, through the delivery CLI. That sits on top of Erlang as the execution engine under here. There's a database, which is Postgres, and then there's also a source control management, so Git is there. What I'm doing is checking my Git repo out of this is my remote branch or my remote repository, checking things out and pushing them into there. And then delivery is talking with the chef server, which of course uses Erlang. On the server side, it's also using the push jobs technology within the chef server to push these changes out to your build nodes. Let's just check in on our pipeline, and then I'm happy to take whatever questions you have. So this guy, my change, of course, it was just going through, oh, what failed here? Oh, my syntax failed. I'm going to just rerun that and see what happens. Yeah, I'm not sure why that failed. I mean, I could look into the log, but why look into the log when there's a rerun button? Like, let's just rerun it and see what happens. That's what you do when your continuous integration server breaks, right? It's probably just a sporadic change. Just rerun that job. Let's see what happens. All right, that's chef delivery. What do you think? Pretty cool? Yeah. All right. So I'm happy it's still failing. Let's see if I can figure out why it's failing there. Let's see. Raise runtime error. Cookbook name. Cookbook was modified and the version was not updated in the metadata file.
Oops. Which tool?
Let's see. So that was part of the syntax test. So the syntax test in this case, only because I know how everything works, it's the delivery cookbook in its syntax recipe that sees that there was a change, and it will test has the version changed from what I knew it to be currently. So it's the delivery cookbook has the logic to test that for me. Yeah, it has the existing cookbook and it sees the change that's coming in, so it just does a comparison of those two. Right. All right. So what am I doing? Bump version, and then delivery review. No open. Push that up there. Now, if I come back to here. Now I've bumped the version. Now it's running its syntax lint in unit. So we're going to let that run. When it's done, I'll approve the change. Then we'll deliver, and we'll see everything is happy with our pipeline. What questions can I answer? Actually, before we start getting into questions, thank you, YouTubes and people, for watching. But we're going to call this broadcast over. There are 5 viewers. Everyone say hi to the 5 viewers. Loud and proud. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. We're in Toronto live.